morning, and first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this talk. Thank you especially to Dov Weiner and to Alison Kupiecki, whom I met before in the Athena context. And yeah, I'm really impressed about the number of participants here. It's amazing, and yeah, I hope I can comply with your expectations of the workshop. Yeah, first of all, I want to say I have titled my speech now Publishing Cultural Collections with SKOS and Lido. So I have added a little standard more. As SKOS is focusing on controlled vocabularies and the other side is to publish and to get to the internet your the description of your, I'm sorry. Yeah, the collection description of your real objects. We will see that later on. I just want to make the point that I will focus on SKOS in the middle of the talk, and at the beginning we will also talk about some other standards, the broad view of these standards. So first of all, let me say a short sentence about my institution, which is the German Documentation Center for Art History, the Image Archive Photo Marburg. The Image Archive contains around 1.7 million images on mainly European art and architecture. And so on one hand, our task is to collect photographs and document them. And on the other hand, we do also conduct research on the history and theory and practice of the photograph as a cultural visual asset. We also run a database with about 2 million photographs on art and architecture. This database contains the collections of about 80 partner institutions. As I said before, it's focused on art and architecture mainly in Germany and in Europe. As you see here, we have also a few pictures of the Bauhaus architecture here in Tel Aviv, which I put on the screen. Yeah, and as we deal with data from about 80 different institutions, it's really an everyday issue for me to integrate data from different databases and to handle the controlled vocabularies that are used in these different databases. So we really depend on using standards to integrate all this information. The broader context of my work is the working group, the special interest group documentation within the German Museum Association. Here I put the main institutions that are involved in the standards work that we are carrying out. So you can see it's there are represented all the regions of Germany, and a lot of different online portals and union catalogs that present cultural collections on the internet. Quite a few of these institutions are also involved in the Athena project, that is especially the State Museums of Berlin, and the Library Service Center in the southern part of Germany, and my institution with contributing its data and also the standards work we're carrying out. So you can see here, I'm really coming from a museum perspective. I know that there are many librarians and archivists here in the here in the room. So I hope you will be interested to follow also the museum perspective that I'm focusing on, for sure, including the perspectives of libraries and archives as well. So Dov already presented the agenda for the workshop. In the first step, I will provide an introduction, the broad view of standards, and this is really focused on standards used in the museum documentation. Yes, that I suppose that will be new for most of you. I hope it will be possible to follow nevertheless. In a second step, I will focus a little bit in detail on Lido, which is the metadata format that is used within the Athena project for contributing data to Europeana, especially from museums. Lido is the acronym for Lightweight Information Describing Objects, and it's a harvesting format for providing core data from museum holdings. In the third step, then, we will have a thorough introduction to SKOS. But so you see, in the first step, you have to survive some museum information, and then we will move to the SKOS, Simple Knowledge Organization System. Then we will have the presentations by the Israel institutions, and afterwards I will show you some concrete mapping examples to SKOS and to Lido and how to relate them, and we can see how far we can go into detail there. And at the end, but also in the middle, I hope we will have some discussion. So I really encourage you to ask questions at any time if you don't understand what I'm trying to say, or if you have any comment, please go forward and interrupt me. Last remark. Before I'm starting, my presentation includes quite a lot of text slides, so it's not a really exciting visual experience, but I thought as you may want to see the presentation later on and follow it afterwards and understand it also, it would be nice to have most of the information also on the slides.
Copies of the slides?
Yes, sure. I can provide it afterwards for presentation on the internet as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we start with the first point, the broad view standards. And I want to motivate a bit why should we anyway care about standards? Why just don't have our own database and organize it as it's appropriate in our own institution's world? I think there are 3 points in the last few years. There is really an increasing relevance of internet presence for museums and for sure other collections. An increasing interest and also necessity to integrate your collection data into union catalogs and portals, and thus facilitate resource discovery in a cross-collection and even cross-sectoral manner. So what we see evolving is on a national level and on the European level, portals such as Europeana. In the German context, we will right now start with the German digital library, which includes information on cultural heritage from the different sectors. And third step, or third perspective, there are also increasing requests and increasing interest to make your information available for the semantic web environment and especially the linked data initiative, and here especially the publication of controlled vocabularies is a big issue, which we will talk about. So I really want to stress this point. It's all about making your information understandable outside of your collection database, your home context, because usually if we look at several databases, we will find lots of information that is just understandable within the context of this one institution. But at the moment that you publish it on the internet together with other information, it will be necessary to make many information that is implicitly included in the database to make it explicit, and to refer to standard formats so that the information can really be integrated. So there is a need for convenient instruments to provide cultural collection information from different collections, from different object classes, libraries, archives, museums. Within museums, also very different collections, art, natural history, technical history, cultural history, ethnology. There is a broad spectrum of object classes that shall be presented in a common way in the internet. You have very different data structures in the several databases that institutions are working with. You run many different software systems. I don't know what is the case here in Israel. At least in Germany, we have around 10 quite big systems, and then lots of small homemade databases with their very own data structure that nobody understands outside of their own context. So, talking about standards, we have to consider different layers. I will call it. So, on the first layer, we have the publication and exchange protocols, the more technical view, which is, as we heard before, quite well standardized. We have the internet protocols, TCP, IP, HTTP. The technical side is usually the simpler side of the of the issue. The content and semantic aspect is much more difficult to integrate. So the second layer, we have to look on our data structure standards. Then we have data content standards and data value standards. And I'll show you this in an overview here. So as I explained already, the first layer is just the technical side, HTTP, mostly OAI, PMH, but also other protocols like XMPP or SRU. You can use many different technical protocols to publish and exchange your data. And that's just a technical question, so not so interesting from my point of view. or from our point of view here today, I would say. Then in the next step, we have the data structure standards. And I enumerate here the big museum standards that we have. That is CDWA in the North American community. These are the categories for the description of works of art. And Spectrum, which is, comes from UK and is quite commonly used in Europe, which is, yeah, I will have a slide on that afterwards also. For these data structure standards, we often have a data format defined as XML schema to deliver the data to other repositories. On the right side, you see the SKOS CRM, which is the CRM is the acronym for the Conceptual Reference Model for Cultural Heritage Information. It is developed within the Documentation Committee of the International Museum Association. And I put it here aside because it's not a data structure standard, but it's really a reference model. So you can refer your own data structure to the CRM and thus express it in a more generally understood way. Third, we have the data content standards, and I just put, I only put the CCO, the Cataloging Cultural Objects here. For the libraries world, that would be AACR in the North American, but I think also on the international level, the Anglo-American cataloging rules, yes. Yes, and let me add before on the level of the data structure standards for the libraries world, we have MARC most of all. And for the archives world, we have the EAD, the encoding archive descriptions. And fourth layer, the data value standards. That is where we are going into SKOS. That is the question, which are the real data values to populate the different categories. And here, also coming from the museum world, we have the big vocabularies of the Getty Research Institute in the United States. That is the AAT, the Arts and Architecture Thesaurus. That is, for example, icon class. That is also for the libraries world, the LCSH, the Library of Congress subject headings. That is ULAN, the Union List of Artist Names. And then we have lots of national data value standards, controlled vocabularies that are used yeah, on national or even only on an institutional level. And this is the point where SKOS provides a data model for publication of these vocabularies so that we will be able to refer our data to other data, real data entries. We will see that later. So, SKOS CRM, which is an ISO standard, in less than a nutshell, the SKOS CRM, most of the people look at it as a very complex and unhandleable model. I'll try to get the main idea in 2 slides only. The CRM, the conceptual reference model of SKOS, is developed, I mentioned it before, within the Documentation Committee of the International Council of Museums. and it is a formal domain ontology for cultural heritage information. It comes from the museum world. It is, in a first step, modeled from the museum perspective, but there are activities ongoing to harmonize it with the FRBR, the functional requirements of bibliographic records from the library world, and also a discussion with the archive world is just starting to get the different models harmonized into one common ontology for the cultural heritage sector. So the CRM describes the things that the cultural heritage sector deals with and how these things relate to each other. This is mainly the idea of an ontology. It is expressed as an object-oriented schema. And as I mentioned before, it establishes a conceptual basis for integration and access to cultural heritage information. It is not a data structure standard on its own. It's really a conceptual model. It provides the semantic clue how to integrate the different information. And the core concepts of the CRM and the main idea really is the event-oriented approach, which I try to explain in a few words. If we have a museum object, we usually describe the object as material, as an object of material, or maybe also immaterial culture. And we describe several information, for example, about the creation of the object, about the provenance of the object, about the use of the object, how it was found in the archaeological area, for example. So all this information is event-related information. It's like to look on the museum object, like to look on the life cycle of the object and identify in which events this object was involved. For example, the creation of itself, and for example, the use or the find in natural history, the collecting event. So we have in collection databases often data fields like artist or creation date or finding place, fields like that. And all these do relate to an event in which the object was present or was used in. So the main idea of the CRM is to put the event or the activities, which is a subclass of event, into the center of the focus and describe who, so actors, what, the real things, the objects, when, so at what time, and where, at which place this event occurred. And so you can reduce many information about cultural objects to really to these relationships between event and the other entities. So mainly the relationship between objects and actor, date, and place information is mediated by an event. This is really the main idea that leads us later on to the Lido model to represent object data from several collections in one relatively simple data model. Any questions? Okay. The second level I mentioned was the data content standards. So just a few words about the cataloging cultural objects. This is, in the museum world, really quite the first approach to define such a standard for data contents. So far, we haven't had a standard compared to AACR in the museum world. So this is really a manual for describing, documenting, and cataloging cultural works independently of the database and the data structure in which the information is stored. It intends to inform the decision-making process of the catalogers and builders of cultural heritage information. So each time you documentalists do an entry in their database, they make a decision on how this content is presented, in which, if the name is entered in the form forename, surname, or the other way around, things like that. And the CCO deals with this kind of questions to make recommendations on how to how to populate your data fields. It employs generic concepts that can be used with any metadata element sets, and here I want to focus also on one example of the Morgan Library and Museum in New York. So the CCO is really a standard that can be used, that can help to analyze on how to represent, for example, a collection object, a separate, a unique collection object, for example, in a bibliographic system based on MARC and AACR. So, as in the library world, we deal not with real world objects that are unique in the world, but we record just information on a publication that is available on many different places in the world. Contrarily, in museums, we really describe unique works that are just, that exist only in this museum collection. So it's quite a difference what kind of information is stored about these entities, and so the CCO helps you, can help you to decide how to include information from different from different sites into one database. You can see, have a look on the 10 principles of CCO. I think maybe we will switch that at the moment. On the data structure level, we have the CDWA and CDWA Lite, the categories for the description of works of art. The CDWA describes really the whole content of an art database. It includes about 532 categories, and it describes really all the information that you may want to store about a work of art or architecture. And in addition, the CDWA Lite is an XML schema to describe core records for works of art and material culture. And this is intended just to publish and to record information that is interesting for the public, and that is also available for the public, because you may store in your database a lot of information, administrative information, and also acquisition information, for example, that is not intended to be published to the whole, to be published on the internet. So the CDWA Lite reduces the categories of the CDWA to this core focus. And here we have a look on the data, the elements, the CDWA Lite elements, and you may see, you may recognize quite a lot of information units that you know, like object work type, you title your work, then you have creator information, measurements, materials technique, some more classification information. Then you have the dating information, location, the subject of your object, and some more administrative elements. Here you can see one specific point that is made in the CDWA. That is that in the CDWA we distinguish always display and indexing information. So we provide the information in two different ways. On one hand, optimized for retrieval, for research, for building up an index of the data. And on the other hand, we optimize it for display, on how we want to this information to be seen on the internet. So here also the common example is an artist data field, where most of the vocabularies are organized in the way that you have first the surname, comma, and the forename of a person. But when this information is displayed, you may want to switch it around, and you will not have Stein Regina, but Regina Stein, maybe with the vital dates in brackets and so on. So here you can really optimize and decide, the museum can decide on how its data is presented in a portal. This is one of the main ideas. We will see that in a few minutes within the Lido schema as well. Now just a few words on the spectrum standard, which is provided by Collections Trust in UK and is an international standard for collections management. The main idea, or the main point here is that it focuses, it consists of two main sections. That is, on one hand, the information requirements, the information units, as also in the CDWA, but it also focuses on all the procedures which occur in the collection management, like loan information and things like that. And here you have also an XML schema that provides a standard format for exchanging object records between different collections management systems. And here I want to stress that the objective of Spectrum is really the whole world of museum documentation and collection management. So it's really quite a large schema as well. Museum DAT. I haven't put now many information on the background of these different standards. Museum DAT is mainly the work that we've done in Germany within the documentation committee of the German Museum Association in the last 2-3 years. It's, like CDWA Lite, a harvesting format for providing core data from museum holdings. It is technically specified in an XML schema. and published at this website. But here I want to stress it is really not a fully developed data exchange format for exchanging the whole information that you have stored in your database. And it's also not a format designed for proper cataloging. It's really focused on publishing, as also SKOS. We will see that later on. We developed museum.dat from CDWA Lite. Why didn't we just take CDWA Lite? These are the main points. First, the CDWA Lite is very much focused on fine arts, as its starting point was eventually delivering metadata from an art collection, the Getty Museum, to a digital library on art, which is Artstore, both institutions in the United States. In Germany, we wanted a format that covers object data of manifold provenance, such as cultural history, natural history, history of technology. Challenge 2, the CDWA Lite is very much focused on North American data standards that I mentioned before, the CDWA, the vocabularies, the CCO as data content standard. And we needed a generalization of this scope for further standards and other languages. So within the working group, the data exchange working group, we just took the event-oriented approach of the CDOC CRM that I explained before. We made a CDOC CRM analysis of the CDWA Lite and realized that the event-oriented approach allows for generalizing the format with various object data. And also, as the CDOC CRM is an ISO standard, it is the reference model, and metadata standard should be CRM compliant. So this is really a reconfiguration of CDWA Lite based on CDOC CRM. And here you can see the schema elements, and you will recognize that it's mainly these are the same elements as in the CDWA Lite before. We have just made this main reconfiguration that we took the actor information. In CDWA Lite, you have only creator information. We generalized that into actor information. We took the date and location elements and put it together in an event set, which is classified by an event type. And now we come to Lido, that is the metadata format used within the Athena project. This is a joint effort now of the CDWA Lite museum.dat and Spectrum communities, and it's based on a substantial review process after a 2-year period of practical information with CDWA Lite and museum.dat, recommendations for the CDOC CRM analysis, and especially requirements of Spectrum. So the point where we have reached now is really to integrate all these efforts into one joint format. That is the data model used for museums within Athena. And now maybe a question that you were thinking about during my whole speech, why not just use doubling core, as it is a standard, a very common standard, currently the preferred schema for lots of repositories, and especially for OAI harvesting. So the point I want to stress on doubling core was originally designed for web resource discovery. So a web resource is really, it's a web page. It's a resource that you can find on the internet. it was not designed to describe real-world objects. And so, at least in the museum community, most of the people agree that Dublin Core is not appropriate for describing cultural materials because its elements are very broad and generic. They are usable for a wide range of resources, but they are not able to capture in a meaningful manner the semantics of the cultural heritage information. And instead, we have to say that Dublin Core really encourages mix-up of semantically different information in the same elements. So it's a loss of information when you map your collections database to Dublin Core that, at least in the museum community, is not regarded as appropriate. Because in the end we get unsatisfying retrieval results. If you like, at the end we can have a look, for example, on Europeana. The current data model of Europeana uses Dublin Core, and if you search for museum data there, you will find very obscure mix-ups of within the results. So, it's like a summary now of what I've said before. We integrate all these approaches in LIDO, which is the lightweight information describing objects schema. Its construction principles, it allows for contributing data and images relating to an object. It delivers the whole information. It has few mandatory elements, but is a semantically rich format. One main point is that it includes links back to the home context. This is also within Europeana an important point, that you also want to link back to the information in your own, in the context of the origin institution. And last point, which is very important today, it provides references to controlled vocabularies and authority files. So once again, we have mainly the same elements, object work type and classification information. We have information that identifies an object, like title, inscriptions, repository, descriptions. This is the left side. And now on the right side, we will have a look on the event set and the relations information, because the question you may ask if you want to publish collections information on the internet, where is the artist information, where is the creation date, where's the finding place? So we assume, as I mentioned before, that the relationship between an object and any actor, date, or place information is possible in two ways. Or the object was present at an event, such as creation, find, use, having participants or carried out by some actors and taking place at some time in some place. And the other possibility, and this is mainly the approach of the libraries, in the libraries world, the object refers to such an entity by depicting it. So this is mainly the subject element. And indexing in the libraries world is much more about the subject element, what a book is about, than describing the book itself as a material instance of a work. So we have events in LIDO. And we always relate actor, date, and place information by these elements. So here you have an example of our build index database. It's part of a castle in Germany, and we have, for example, quite detailed information on the building history of this castle. So we have construction information, the architect, and the date. And then this building has been modified several times, enlarged, and so on. And so this information now can be stored in a semantically very well-defined way in the event set. We also include materials information, for example, in the event set, because within a creation event, some material is consumed, but maybe also in a restoration event, other materials are consumed. And here you can describe in a very appropriate way to which kind of event some information relates. And the second focus, the subjects in Lido. Usually, in the libraries world, you just you have one subject field, like, and you index an entity with entries, for example, of the subject headings list. What we do here in Lido is that we no, it's not right.
No, there's many subject fields. For example, in Mars, it's not just one subject field. They're not called that, but it's many different subject fields according to
yes, but you can apply many different entries. But do you use also different vocabularies for populating the subject field?
Absolutely.
Okay. For so just yeah. Okay. Just tell me, to give me an idea, which kind of...
In Mark, there's
yes.
650s and 600s and 610s and...
yes.
They have different names, but each concept has a different field. It's not that all the subjects go into one kind of field.
Yes, okay. I apologize, that wasn't... I didn't want to say that you just have one subject field, but which kind of vocabulary do you use to populate them?
Yeah, a control vocabulary too.
Yeah.
LC, like, depends on what's being... What is the subject?
Okay. Yeah.
Conceptually, there's different subjects.
Okay. So it's quite comparable here. We provide in the publishing in the publication schema the possibility to assign concepts, actor, date, place, event information in separate fields, so that you, just to show it here, so that you really can relate. If you have an etching with a portrait on it, you can relate this to an actor, and you can give the whole actor information, relating it to the vocabulary with preferred names, alternative names, and, for example, vital dates. And the point I wanted to stress is that at least, well, in Dublin Core, coming from Dublin Core, you have one subject field, and there you put in concept information, for example, an icon class notation or an entry, an entry from any classification scheme. You put in the name of a real-world person. You put in the name of a place. So that is the point I want to stress on, that here you populate one single data field with semantically very different information. Yeah. So the subjects in Lido, the subject field in Lido now allows you for a very detailed description of the subject, and especially in the museum world, which is, and in my home institution in the image archive, it's quite important to distinguish between the real world museum object and the photograph of the object. So here you can also record information about a photograph as part of a collection, a historical photograph maybe. And in the subject information you can describe all the content of the photograph, what is shown on the photograph in a quite detailed way. You can describe, for example, an event here. For example, we have the founder of the image archive Photo Marburg on a journey to Mallorca. So you can assign all the information about this activity. This was just an overview on Lido. And the question is, who cares now about Lido? That is the SKOS. As I mentioned before, there were several activities on several points in the United States, in Germany and UK to establish such a publishing format for museum data. And now we joined all these efforts into one single common effort into a SKOS working group, data harvesting and interchange. And this is the place to become the home for the internationalized and especially SKOS CRM compliant harvesting format. So that's the point of the museum perspective, the information on the standards used in the museum world to publish their data. Yeah, and maybe just if you have some questions or some comments on this part at the moment, yes.
What is your approach when you're cataloging an object? Are you cataloging and describing the object or the digital representation of the object? Because all technical metadata and the administrative metadata is of the digital entity,
yes,
not
yes.
the physical entity.
Yes.
But what you showed us is the physical.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very important question. In our database at Photo Marburg, we really we document the real world object, and we understand a photograph as a visual representation of this object, and for sure we also store administrative information, also who was the photographer, when was the picture taken, and so on, for each picture, also which perspective the picture takes onto the object. And all this information is part of the administrative metadata part in the Lido schema. So
you don't publicize the digital information about
yes.
the format, the weight of the file.
Yeah. This information usually in the museum context is not of many interest. No, we don't publish that. It can be, if we had a closer look on the schema, you will see that there are many sub-elements in the administrative metadata set where you can also carry information about such technical information.
And what would you do with the video art or digital art? It's just digitally born, or video that you have. The thing is digital.
Yes.
The object is digital. Then what would you use?
Well, the object, in this point, I would say the object is the content of the video. So the video itself, it's just one material, one physical carrier for the...
but if you don't have a physical carrier, you have a file.
Yes.
What would you describe?
Well, I would, yeah, I ask you back, in what information are you interested? What do you want to know about the video? What is what you want to find?
Actually, both, because I don't know what my users are looking for.
Mm.
Sometimes they will look for the digital technical stuff, and sometimes the real original information.
Yeah. So I can say we really focus on the content information, not so much on the technical information, which formats, how long is a video, and you can store that. You can, for example, if you really record a video as a, if it is a digital file, so you have like a conceptual object. You can tell the length of the video, for example, is a kind of measurement. You can specify in the measurements set which type of measurement you are telling. So, for example, for a video, the length would be a measurement type. So these information units are quite detailed, but I think really the main point at the beginning is to ask yourself, or to be very clear about what do we what information or what is the subject of my documentation? Is it in our example, is it the photograph as an analog or digital born photograph, or is it the object shown on the photograph? There is really these informations are mixed up quite often. And for example, in Europeana, you can find as creation date for one entry the scanning date of a photograph, the date when the analog photograph was taken, and at the same time the date when the shown object was built. And so this is the main point. To be really clear in your, from the beginning, what is the subject of your record? Yes.
Are those standards still developing, or are they fixed?
The standards that first thing, standards are always developing. They are never fixed. And you will always get forward and have to deal with new requirements. But so far, there are published fixed versions of the CDOC CRM, of CCO, the CDWA, Spectrum, and Museum DAT. And regarding on Lido, this is really currently, we expect to publish a version 1.0, by at least in this year, maybe in summer or autumn until the next CEDAW conference. But we have already a version that is now used and implemented within Athena, also in a mapping tool, and so yeah, it's in practical use.
Let's make a short break now.
Yeah.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we continue.
And then we start with a
5 minutes, really short break. 5 minutes, and then we start with SKOS. Okay? You can grab.
Thank you.
It was very good overview.